He has launched the campaign to try and counter the extremists.
Now speaking out to denounce terror and extremism.
30,000 people formed a human chain in the south this afternoon in the name of peace.
We're asking if religious intolerance is on the rise.
We believe that religious freedom is a fundamental human right.
Giving a message that Islam is a religion of peace.
We must all endeavor to spread love and a sense of community.
In the name of God, the gracious, the merciful, may the peace and blessings of Almighty God be upon you. Welcome to this, the 9th episode of Press Point. Today, we're looking at the issue of Islam in Britain, and we're particularly interested in the recent coverage of the call to prayer on Channel 4 every morning at around about 3 o'clock. So this is the Azan, and it's been a very strong reaction has been received. Some people are strongly in favour. They feel that it's a very valuable exercise in educating the British public to ensure that the views of Muslims and the beliefs of Muslims are properly understood. For others, it's been hugely controversial. They think it's irrelevant and they think it may even be provocative. So we're discussing this, and we're also looking more deeply at what role the Muslims play in Britain. Do they bring a positive contribution, or is there a negative element to Islam within Britain? So we're looking to get to the basis of this and to really find out the truth. I'm joined as ever by my good friend and brother, Farooq, in the studio.
Jazakallah. Of course, a very important topic we're discussing here. We'd like to hear, as always, from you. Your contribution would be absolutely very, very useful indeed for the show. Send us your tweets to PressPointMTA using the hashtag PressPointMTA. Also, you can send us your emails to presspoint@mt.tv. We're always waiting for your feedback and your contribution. Our PressPoint research team is busy sending out tweets regularly. In the next 1 hour, you'll receive many tweets coming through about the updates as to what was being discussed on the show. So please keep sending in your messages. A lot to look forward to in the next 1 hour.
Yes. And we're very honoured to be joined in the studio by two very special guests. On my immediate left, we have Bashir Ahmed Rafiq Sahib. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum assalam for having me.
Jazakallah. Bashir Sahib is, of course, the former Imam of the London Mosque. This is the oldest mosque in London, opened in 1926. We're also joined by Nasiruddin Sahib, and you are, of course, the president of the London region of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. So, a great honour to have you. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Assalamu alaikum. So, Farooq, you've been getting to grips with this issue. You've been doing a lot of research online. What have you found?
Well, the topic about the Azan issue we're talking about, of course, has been very popular throughout the UK, actually, and an independent newspaper gave this story the news that Channel 4, to provoke viewers who associate Islam with terrorism, with live call to prayer during Ramadan. Of course, this picture is worthwhile seeing. That is a picture of our very dear Baitul Futuh Mosque, indeed. The camera has been put in a place where we can see the inside of the dome of the Baitul Futuh Mosque as well. And at the same time, the next story is on BBC, which is, of course, after the reaction has been seen. And it says Channel 4 rejects criticism over Ramadan broadcast. And speaking at the Commons Culture, Media and Sports Select Committee, Mr. Abraham, who's in fact the gentleman who's the chairman of Channel 4, he has said that it was a thoughtful exercise as part of Channel 4's remit. And further he says that the viewership has really grown, actually. And he says that the slot had attracted 186,000 viewers, which is almost triple its usual audience at that time. Certainly a good news for the TV channel. And lastly, for the time being, there was also, the ex-Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone. He actually commissioned a study a few years back, and the results were, of course, very much similar to what we see in the present day as well. The result was that 91% of articles in national newspapers about Muslims are negative. And of course, he says, Ken Livingstone, that these findings were a damning indictment of the media and urged editors and program makers to review the way that portray Islam.
Well, this is really useful background information. So what we wanted to do was to go out there and to ask some people what do they feel about the airing of the Azan. And as well as that, we've got a few brief clips so our viewers at home and our guests in the studio can take a look and see what does this look like. So let's go to that video now.
Excellent.
Following Channel 4's announcement earlier this month, there was widespread reaction from both Muslims and non-Muslims in Britain. While some condemn Channel 4 for using this as a form of publicity, others welcome this decision as a means of representing Islam in a positive light in the mainstream media.
I mean, our hope for the whole thing really is to draw attention to, a significant minority in Britain. There are nearly 3 million Muslims in Britain. For most of them, Ramadan is going to be a major part of their year. Most of them will go about the practice of Ramadan without making a big noise about it, without necessarily telling everyone about it. And hopefully this will bring a bit of attention to the experience of Ramadan and what they're going through in this period.
We feel that this is Channel 4 taking its traditional role as it sees itself to wind up Middle England and those who do not share its views and its approach.
Despite Islam's increasing demographics, the religion is largely underrepresented in mainstream society. Today, Muslims in the UK represent almost 5% of the population, and according to a recent survey, 1 in 10 people under 25 are now Muslim. This fast-paced change is leading to calls for greater representation of Islam in society, which recently included debates on the inclusion of more Islamic history within the school curriculum.
If it actually helps someone spiritually to get on and have a better life, then yeah, it's good.
I think it's pretty good because it shows the histories of different cultures and why they do certain things in their cultures.
I haven't really thought about it in depth. It's a good thing, really. It exposes other people to other cultures and stuff, People shouldn't be blinded to just one culture or just one religion, so yeah, it's a good thing. I think it's a mix. Some people think about, it as a terrorist thing. Some people who have friends that are Muslim, like myself, know that it's not that. I think it's a mix. Depends who people are and how they look at things and who they're around. The kind of perception that they get about Islam and stuff.
It's obviously a television programme it's a channel that everyone knows of and sees and watches. So I think it's good for cultures and different kind of cultures to see.
Yeah, I do think there should be more Muslim people in the media, sort of having their own fight, if that makes sense. Yeah. Not their own fight, but like showing their own opinions and things.
It's good having it on an English TV channel such as BBC. I've worked with a few Muslims, they're very good. There's nothing wrong with them. It's a religion that's positive, the same as my religion. It's positive to me, it's positive to them.
I've actually got the Quran in my hand, right there. So, yeah, I've understood it now because I've just spoken to someone and I think it sounds good. I'm going to read the Quran and just get a gist of what it's really about.
I think it's good. But I think if they have genuine Muslim people, if they have correct information, then it's fine. We don't see a lot of Muslim people on TV and things like that, and if it is mostly to do with terrorism and bad things, which isn't the case.
We live in a diverse country and diverse towns, so we should be able to celebrate and respect other religions, other faiths, other values and stuff, and it certainly does do that.
So, coming to you, Mr. Rafiq, I mean, you've heard here the UK Independence Party, they're saying that this is an effort to wind up Middle England. They think that this is provocative and they think it's negative. What's your opinion? Is this a good thing?
I think it's a very good thing. There are a lot of Muslims now living in this country, and the people of Britain should know about Islam, that we keep fast and we wake up early in the morning and the azan is given, and they must familiarize themselves with this phenomena, because we are here to stay, and the Muslims are in millions in this country now.
Mr. Dean, we've heard on the video on the VT, the incredibly positive response. We actually looked for negative responses, but we found positive. I mean, we weren't seeking them out, but we wanted a balanced picture, but it's a very strong positive response. One young lady there said that more representation needs to be given to Muslim voices on television. Do you feel like this is the case? Do you think the media needs to really get to grips with Islam in a deeper level?
I think it's about education as well. We need to educate the public, and they seem to be very receptive to any information. There is a fiduciary duty on the media to represent, like Channel 4 has, the minorities as well. 5% is not really a small amount. It's a lot larger than other groups. And I think the media does have to step up to the mark. And as we heard earlier, the survey done by Ken Livingstone in 2007, it showed that 91% of the reports in 1 week were negative reports on Islam. So it's a massive task, and I think the media does have a duty to include more Muslims or Muslim point of view on television.
Mm-hmm. So, Mr. Farooq, I mean, we hear that it's a duty, we hear that it's a key role which the media need to play. But of course, we're all very much aware of the recent atrocities which have taken place. We're aware of the Woolwich killings. Do you feel that, in fact, the Muslim community themselves have a duty? And are they fulfilling their duty to positively represent the true nature of, on the one hand, Ramadan, on the other hand, of Islam as a whole?
Well, it's a very sad commentary from the point of view of Muslims, this Woolwich murder. The thing is that for over 100 years, the missionaries of the Ahmadiyya movement in this country have been preaching that Islam is the religion of peace, terrorism is totally forbidden in Islam, and we have been able to convince to a large extent the local population that Islam is really a religion of peace. But this sort of incident that took place in Woolwich actually put a blemish and a spot on the beautiful face of Islam. They do not represent Islam at all. Those people who have done this, this was something which should be condemned by all the Muslims, by all, with one voice, and because Islam does not believe in these things.
So there's very much an onus on both the press and both on the Muslims to really get to grips with Islam, to really understand it.
Yes.
Brother Farooq, you've been doing some interesting research to look at patriotism. What have you found in relation to Islam?
Absolutely. I think there's a question of perception here. And I think media, of course, portrays as if Islam is all demonized and Islam is a religion which really is preaching hate and so on and so forth. The reality is quite the opposite. Looking at, I mean, of course, there's research done by the University of Essex, which tells a picture which is totally different to what people normally are used to hearing. This is a story on the Guardian newspaper. And looking at, it says, the British Muslims often express a stronger sense of belonging than other citizens. So why are they still seen as outsiders? And the data here, I think, will surprise many people. It says 83% of Muslims are proud to be British citizens. And that's compared to 79% of the general public. So more than the average. Then 77% of Muslims strongly identify themselves with Britain, while only 50% of wider population do. So about 50% more than that, in fact, in terms of in case of Muslims. And lastly, looking at the comparison between Muslims and Christians now, again, Muslims ahead by a percent. So the reality is perceptions are really quite poor because of a very small minority of those people actually perpetrating hate against the general public, that even peace-loving Muslims are also being seen in the same light. Another one more story, which I think will actually please a lot of Muslims, especially in the month of Ramadan, a month of fasting and charity giving. It's the news from yesterday on the faith section of the Times newspaper. It says Muslims are Britain's top charity givers. That's something very surprising for many people, actually, and you'll be very surprised to hear that Muslims top it and the Jewish come second. So Muslims pay per year an average of £371. Jewish pay £270. £100 difference between the two. And then again, further down, it's even more interesting that Roman Catholics and Protestants, they pay about 170 odd pounds less than the Muslims do. Lastly, very importantly and very interestingly, atheists pay 1/3 of what Muslims pay, and least compared to any other religion. So clearly the love of God teaches love of humans. So really, I mean, it's a very interesting story. So let me ask a question to our brother Bilal Atkinson Saab, who's online with us at the moment. Bilal Saab, Assalamu alaikum, can you hear me?
Wa alaikum salam.
Bilal Saab, in the light of this, and of course other stories as well, do you think, is that true that Muslims or Islam is really compatible with the British way of life?
Well, first of all, Islam is compatible with all countries. The Holy Quran addresses people, it says, "O mankind." It doesn't say, "O Muslims." Islam was created by God, and it's such a beautiful religion, has to be very magnetic. If you, read the true teachings of Islam. As far as this country is concerned, our needs are the same. We're all human beings, and the Holy Quran addresses these needs. This country, we find there's lots of equality, there's justice, There's respect and loyalty. This is what the Holy Quran encourages us to do. In this country, we look after the elderly, we look after the poor, we look after the needy. There are social benefits, there's the NHS. All these beautiful things we find in this country are, in fact, part of the teachings of Islam, which were initiated over 1400 years ago. So yes, it is compatible with British society. And I'm
Mr.
sure.
Atkinson, can I ask you another question as well? My problem, of course, I should have introduced you earlier, Mr. Atkinson. My apologies. So Mr. Atkinson is, of course, the regional president of the northeast section of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. So a great pleasure to have you with us. Thank you very much. Mr. Atkinson, what are you seeing up north in relation to your mosques, for example? And how can you use mosques to positively relate to members of the British public, particularly this time when we know that, for example, in Birmingham recently, some mosques were bombed. So how are you managing to relate to the wider community in a positive manner?
When our mosque was first opened, I come from a mosque, my headquarters is in Hartlepool, in the northeast of England. Our mosque, which was a purpose-built mosque, was built in 2005 and opened by the Khalifa of the day. Since that time, we've had over 7,000 visitors to the mosque, mainly school children, students, community groups. And when they come to the mosque, I always look at the faces of the people. And they all seem very apprehensive about entering these mosques because what they hear about Islam is not what the true story is. So I normally give them a PowerPoint presentation on the beauties of Islamic teaching, and quite a lot are so surprised because they find lots of similarities between, if they're religious, lots of similarities in their own religion, which is maybe Christianity. And when you see the apprehension of coming into the mosque, it's very hard to get those children and students out of the mosque. They like it so much. The BBC Radio did a survey after the mosque was opened, about a year after the mosque was opened, and it asked the local community how they find the mosque and its people. And initially we had a lot of positivity, but the people in the survey said, more than 90% of the people said they liked the mosque, they liked how it's changed the area around it, and they liked the people of the mosque. So we do have play a major role now in trying to deliver the true message of Islam.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed, of course, Brother Bilal. Now, let's look at a few tweets that are coming through, of course. Some are slightly older, some are newer, respectively. The first one, of course, is a feedback from Yasir Khan, who says that love how Channel 4 has the Azan and Ramadan diaries, doing an amazing job of showing how Muslims are part of Britain. Then Hasham Ahmed says Islam is certainly free to practice for all sects in the UK than in most Muslim countries. British laws must be commended. Then FM Shakil says, insofar as freedom of thoughts, religion, association, rule of law and equality are concerned, yes, it is compatible. And lastly, for the time being, Masood Nasir says, you may have to first define British society. Islam is for all mankind.
Really valuable points then, hey? So this was part one. This was looking particularly at the coverage of Ramadan. Now we want to look forwards and say, how do Muslims contribute to life within Britain as well? So this is what we'll take a look at now. In particular, of course, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community has been here for this year celebrating its centenary anniversary. So this is a great time for celebration. As well as this, we know that there are many Muslims in the country now. We know there are nearly 3 million in light of what Brother Farooq has said to us. So let's take a closer look at the history of Islam within this country. And we have a video to take a look at this. So let's tune in.
Islam has had links with Britain for over 300 years. Many may not be aware that the first Englishman to become a Muslim was John Nelson, who converted to Islam at some point in the 16th century. A 1641 document refers to a, quote, sect of Mohammedans being discovered here in London. There were also a few conversions to Islam during the period, and a few years later, in 1649, came the first English version of the Quran by Alexander Ross. Islam has been established in Britain for well over a century, with the first mosque being built in London in 1924. At this time, the Muslim community was far fewer in numbers than it is now, yet the links which exist with the local community today still existed then. Following the establishment of the Ahmadiyya community in Britain in 1913, the foundation stone of the mosque was laid in 1924. In October 1926, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community held the opening of the Fazl Mosque in Southfields, inviting local residents and dignitaries from far and wide to attend the reception. Almost 600 guests attended this reception to commemorate the opening of what was then the only mosque in the capital city.
Mr. Rafiq, it's very interesting to watch this. I mean, we can see people here, British people, just after the First World War, in the borough within London. And many people don't often associate this era with Islam. How did the community at that time, the local community within Southfields and Wandsworth, how did they respond to the opening of this mosque?
Well, the thing is that the mosque was opened in, as it is said, in 1926, and it was widely reported in the British press. The media took a lot of interest in this. There was a Pathé News also, which was shown in the cinemas. And as it has been already mentioned, that 600 people were there. And it was from all class sections of the society who came for the opening ceremony of the mosque. So it was very welcome news for the people of Britain to have a mosque in London, and generally people appreciated it, and they thought that it was a great step forward for the Ahmadiyya movement to build a mosque here.
Mr. Dean, I mean, we know then obviously there was a very positive response from what Mr. Rafiq has told us, but how did the community themselves view this? We talked about the duty on Muslims to reach out and to express Islam. How did they at that time reach out to the local community in order to convey the message of Islam as a peaceful message to the local community?
I mean, the mission when it was established in the UK was to promote the true message of Islam, as Imam Sahib has mentioned. And from the day one, the doors of the Jamaat in the UK have always been open. And throughout, as Bilal Sahib has mentioned, also throughout the period, all of the missions and mosques that we have built, we have an open door policy, everyone's welcome. Just to give you an example, here in Bath-o-Fathu, we have about 30,000 visitors who are non-Ahmadi Muslims, non-Muslims who visit the mosque. And many of them are school children, they're intellectuals. We have many events here. We go out and we do an outreach program. We hold exhibitions in libraries throughout the country. And that's been going on from the onset. I know in the early days in various villages around the country, the imams of the mosque would go and hold seminars. But that's continued, and under the guidance of Hazrat Amir Mu'mineen, we have a campaign to educate the British public, to welcome them to the true message of Islam. And we've delivered 4 million leaflets to doors in the UK so far. It's a project that was initiated by Hazrat Amir Mu'mineen, and this follows a survey that Hazur ordered and instructed the UK Jamaat to do just over 3 years ago. In response to that, this program has started. Majlis Ansarullah hold regular events in villages. Majlis Khudam al-Ahmadiyya do as well. Lajna Iman, the ladies' organization, they go to visit schools. So we have a policy where we want to educate the public about the true message of Islam, which, as the leaflet tells you, is loyalty to one's nation. We believe in freedom of speech, equality, respect, and we wish to live in peace. And that message, I think, the Jamaat has done very well in educating the public, and we have seen a big response from politicians, we've seen a big response from the general public, but also the media, which we mentioned earlier. The media has warmed up to it, and I think a lot of the media coverage we've had through that has helped to alleviate a lot of the Islamophobia that we saw in the early 2007.
So this is really painting a picture of Muslims within Britain who are looking to promote Islam in a very positive manner, in a very peaceful manner. And this is a very different history to the history which is commonly conveyed within the media, isn't it? I know as well, Farooq, you've come across some really interesting excerpts of the message of Islam being promulgated in a very beautiful manner.
Yes, now we're going back 87 years actually, when this mosque was opened. The message sent from Hazrat Mirza Bashiruddin Mahmud Ahmad, the second Caliph of the Prophet Messiah, peace be upon him, he sent a message, which let me read only a short excerpt from the end of it. He said at the opening, it was a big event, of course, a lot of people were there, 600 people as you mentioned, and again, big event. The message was also very, very open and very broad for the society in large. Hazur said, the world of today is a sorrowful scene of polytheism, irreligiousness, hatred between nations, tension between classes. Hence it is a duty of every honest man who loves his God to wake from his sleep and make houses consecrated in the name of God, strongholds of his unity and centers of union, instead of making them places of irreligiousness and means of disunion. So certainly uniting, as you said, different communities. Same message 87 years after, nothing has changed because of the divinely guided Khilafat. Then there's some articles on the newspapers and quotes from that time. There is on Times article in 1926 which says the occasion is one of the great importance in the history of religious movements outside Christianity in this country, for the mosque situated in the metropolitan borough of Wandsworth, whose mayor will be present at the ceremony, is the first building erected in London for Islamic worship. Then let's take a look at the image on screen, perhaps in a few seconds. The Daily Chronicle on 4th of October, the same day, the day after actually of the opening, says East and West have rarely met in a setting so strange and picturesque as seen yesterday, when for the first time in London's long history the Mohammedan call to prayer was sung from the glistening minarets of a mosque at Southfields. Of course, they don't say Mohammedan out of disrespect, it's just the way in the West they used to call Muslims, which is to be, you need to understand that point. So certainly, of course, all across the board, there are so many more such messages as well. Of course, we can't include in the show all of them, but that was certainly a great success for Islam in this country, Islam which brings only peace.
So, Mr. Dean, I mean, the Muslim people we know from the video have been Muslims have been here since the 1600s.
Yeah.
The mosque was opened in the beginning of the 1900s. It's been a long time, but still there is this element of Islamophobia, to some extent within the media, which is a sad thing. We can see there's developments to move forwards, but what can be done, do you think, in relation to the media to help them to overcome these misconceptions, these misunderstandings which they have about Islam? How can that be best done?
I mean, Islam has been here for more than 400 years, but in that time, the Orientalists have been great enemies of Islam. And the books that we've seen that were written by the historians here in the United Kingdom and parts of Europe have ingrained a mistrust and a dislike for the true message of Islam, and they've totally distorted the picture and the message that was given by God Almighty to the Holy Prophet ﷺ, and even his character has been blemished. And the media has been educated, I think, from those books, because as the surveys show, it's quite an aggressive, or has been in the past anyway, a negative connotation. So the way that, as I mentioned earlier, I think we have to strive towards educating the media. It's a process, but also the conduct of Muslims themselves has to be in reflection of their beliefs. At the moment, Ramzan is being focused on, and I've read in the papers that spirituality is coming in, and the articles written by Muslims that we feel very spiritual here. But it's something that Muslims themselves also have to contribute towards. And I think that it'll be a slow process, but I think we're getting there now with Channel 4 coming with the Azan.
So, well, how can we look to build this understanding, Mr. Rafiq, particularly looking back at the 1926 opening of the mosque, and also during your time as an imam in the mosque? What are the key lessons which the Muslim community themselves should look to make sense of how they can best relate to British people that aren't Muslim, but to help them to understand what Islam is really all about? What lessons can be learned from history?
Well, the thing is that when we look at the history of Ahmadiyyat in this country, we find that when the missionaries arrived in the beginning of the century, the problem was that the so-called writers or Orientalists had depicted the picture of Islam in such a bad way that the general population in this country thought that Islam was not a religion, it was just a cult, and it preaches jihad, it is intolerant to other people, and so on and so forth, and there is no status of woman in Islam. I think it was due to the hard work of our missionaries who clarified this situation, and slowly the media started responding to it, and we started getting media response in the sense that articles were published in favor of Islam, and slowly that bad effect that the Orientalist had created disappeared. So it is a great service that the Ahmadiyya Muslim missionaries have done in this country. And I think you look at it from another point of view. In 1924, when Hazrat Khalifatul Masih arrived in this country, Khalifatul Masih Sani, he asked the Imam, the then Imam, that what language is the khutbah delivered. He was told that it was in Urdu because generally there are the Indians in front of him, and therefore the khutbah is in Urdu. And Huzur got very much annoyed and said, "You live in this country. You know, this is the country of where English is spoken, and therefore," he said, "from today I strictly forbid that no sermon be delivered in the mosque in Urdu or in any other language except English." And then he also issued instruction to the missionaries in Britain that as far as possible in their general meetings also English should be adopted. So that was one way, you know, of getting nearer to the local population, that we wanted to speak their language, we wanted to be quite close to them.
What you say is really key about getting nearer to the local community. I mean, Mr. Dean, in this mosque, this is the biggest mosque in Western Europe, this is modern mosque. How does this mosque, for example, or the mosque in Southfields, the first mosque in London, how do these mosques act as a hub for communities, for example? Is it possible for a mosque to perform that cohesive role within a community?
Yes, very much so. And in fact, in Butterworth, I think it's a very good example of that cohesion. When we first announced that we were building a mosque here in 1996, when initially the property was bought, there was major opposition from the neighbours here. In fact, the right-wing National Party members were very close to the mosque, and it was an extremely difficult period for the community to think that whether we had made the right decision. But from the onset, the Jamaat set up a liaison committee, which was made up of the local residents, local schools, churches, police, councillors, and the chair of that committee was an independent local councillor. So the Jamaat, in fact, even the chair of that was run by an independent councillor, and we would attend that meeting. And initially, as you can expect, there was a lot of uproar, and the representatives were very scared. But we slowly educated them, and over the last, in particular in the last 10 years since the mosque has been opened, the mosque is used by the local community for their events. We had the local scouts, they use our facilities just at the bottom of at the back of the mosque. The local community neighbours have had events here. During the Queen's Jubilee events, we held them here. The local college across the road held their examinations here. Many of the local police associations come have their events here, their meetings here. Teachers associations come here. There are blood banks held here, where the local National Blood Association has a drive to raise blood, mainly from the Jamaat members, but outside as well. All sorts of events are taken here. Also, the local schools are benefiting in terms of for their education. They come and visit the mosque, and we go out and we help the local community. In fact, the liaison committee today, the only conversation is what affects the community as a whole. And for example, we are working with the local church, local colleges, football associations to take over the running of local playing fields, which the council cannot afford to do right now as a community. So it's worked very well. And I think this is what Islam teaches us, to work in community and in cohesion. And whenever there are any issues, immediately we address them.
Yes. Well, I think this really resonates with some of the research Farooq has done as well. I mean, you've looked into some early newspaper articles, haven't you?
Yeah, going back in history again, I think very similar to what Amir Saab London, the President of London Regions, mentioned. Nothing has changed really. I mean, doors were open then as well for the mosque, and people could come in and see the true and teachings of Islam and essence of Islam really. So looking at one of the Southwestern Star, there was a newspaper a few days after this, of course, because doors were open and people were getting the right message of Islam. The comment was, judging from the members at Southfields, the Ahmadis are a singularly gentle and tolerant people, it says. Then the Times on 4th of October 26, the Ahmadiyas wield an influence disproportionate to their numerical strength owing to the hold they have secured among educated Mohammedans. Again, I think very similar story. The numbers is not really important here. It's the efficiency of work and the meaning behind the work which is being done, the essence behind it. And The Nation, London, reported that the note of their teaching is a broad-minded toleration of and even cooperation with other religions. The Ahmadiyya seem, so far as I understand their teaching, to be a singularly attractive body. The word singular is pretty commonly used there. And then lastly, for the time being, Sir Muhammad Zafarullah, the member of the Viceroy's Executive Council, says the message of Ahmadiyya, he was also an Ahmadi himself and the companion of the promised Messiah, peace be upon him, a very well-respected gentleman who had held all kinds of high positions in the world as well as in spiritual world. He says the message of Ahmadiyyat to this age is in one word: reconciliation. A reconciliation between the various factors in human life which led to discord and which lead to all that has made life restless and peaceless.
So it's a very, very positive picture. Just to perhaps show the holistic picture of the situation in Britain at the moment, Mr. Rafiq, after the recent Woolwich attacks, then the English Defence League, we've talked about this before, but their hits on the internet went up dramatically. Their main comment and their main analysis of the situation is that Islam is fundamentally contradictory to the British way of life. They feel that Islam does not have a place within Britain, and as such they would like to see the removal of the role of Islam in the public sphere. How do you think that the things that you're telling us, the things that Mr. Dean are telling us, how would you respond to the English Defence League's comments and general Islamophobia in the moment in light of this?
Well, the thing is that it's, I don't think that it's the general view of the general public of this country. This is a narrow view of some of the people who think that Islam preaches terrorism or anything of the sort. Generally, the people respect the teachings of Islam in this country. For instance, in 2008, Rowan Williams, the ex-Archbishop of Canterbury, even said that some parts of the Islamic Sharia should be incorporated into the British legal system. Yes. There was a lot of hue and cry about it, but he came out and he defended himself. So that shows, you know, that among the intellectuals, there is this realization that Islam can provide answer to your question, yes. And it could satisfy the people's religious needs, right. In this country.
This is a key point, and I think this was reflected in the video when there was a gentleman that said that it's a spiritual process, Ramadan. If this is beneficial spiritually, then I very much encourage it. Yes. So why, and to me it seems that as if the members of the British public are beginning to understand Islam in a much more positive way. And this also chimes with Bilal Saab's comments, which he gave in relation to the mosque. Nasiruddin, what is causing this change of understanding? How do you understand it? The minority groups of EDL, they have very negative perceptions, but the majority seem to be warming to Islam. What's behind it?
The human nature of humanity, it warms towards God. There's a void. We know that the attendance of churches is going down. There's a void in lives, and it's a natural tendency to want to fill that void. And I think here in the United Kingdom, I've seen, since I'm born in the United Kingdom, quite a big change in the last, I would say, 10 years in the spirituality or the awareness of a spiritual being. And before, I would find it very difficult to talk about God to people, but now it seems very much more easier. And I think there's an awareness being created because of what's going on in the world. I think people are seeing the bloodshed, the chaos, and these questions are coming, and they don't find that fulfillment from the existing, from either the Church of England or the Roman Catholic Church or whatever faith they have. And Islam, as Imam Sir mentioned, has the appeal where it addresses issues which are normal day-to-day issues of everyday life, and where a lot of religions, you know, they don't seem to fit quite correctly. And
so it's filling the spiritual needs of the British people.
Needs, yes.
And I think this is also very key, because we've heard the elements of the community work in 1926 and now in 2013. Farooq, I know you've found some really interesting examples of the media picking up on community work as well.
There's so similar comparisons between the years anyway, and of course going back those 80 odd years and now. The same picture actually, again, BBC reporting Ahmadiyya Muslim Youth Association starts poppy appeal. Now that picture definitely is in fact the courtyard of the Fazl Mosque. So certainly the same mosque here, the same great work is being done, £20,000 raised. Every year they're doing it to raise money for the British charities. Then the story here with the newer mosque of the two, the modern mosque, the Baitul Futuh Mosque, which was also opened on the 3rd of October, by the way, in 2003 it was. So again, the same story there. The 3,000 people take to streets for Ansar charity walk at Ahmadiyya Muslim Mosque in Morden. You can see a few familiar faces like Ed Davey MP and Councillor Stephen Alan Bridges and of course a few more there, and of course President of the community here and other people. So clearly, and also I think you were telling probably 20,000 or 200,000 pounds were raised as a result?
In the recent walk that took place in Manchester by Majlis Salah, they've raised over already £220,000. The youth organisation Majlis Khadam al-Ahmadiyya have raised £200,000 recently. They had a walk in for about 35 charities in Milton Keynes, and they have Lajna Mala also have raised money for charities, and this is all part of the centenary celebrations of the UK Jamaat. In addition to that, which I didn't mention earlier, but the UK Jamaat has, in the last 12 months, has given 10,000 meals to the needy in London as a part of that, and that's an ongoing thing.
Excellent.
Yes,
so basically, of course, going forward, so collectively more than £500,000 going in 1 year, also a lot of manpower going in. Man hours themselves have a value. And lastly, for the time being, again, the great thing happens in this very mosque where we are for this show, the Baitul Futuh Mosque, is the Ahmadiyya Peace Symposia that take place every year actually here. And that's a beautiful picture of the head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, who is the 5th successor of the Prophet Messiah, who himself gives a keynote address every year in this place with all kinds of backgrounds of people, with all faiths of people, people with faith or people without faith coming here and of course hearing the message of peace that Islam gives.
Mm-hmm. So again, what we're looking at today is Britain and Islam, Islam in Britain. What role does it play? Is it negative? Is it positive? From this analysis, a lot of good news, a lot of real hope for Islam within Britain and for British people approaching Islam as well. Now, often a sticking point can be politics. People can say Parliament is a place that doesn't understand Islam. It's a place that laws which are passed are Islamophobic or they have a negative impact on the Muslim community. But Farooq, I know that you've been taking a look again at this and you found in fact the picture is very, very different in relation to the recent address which has been given in Parliament by the Caliph of Islam, the head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community.
Yes, on 11th June 2013, about a month ago, Hazur, the 5th successor of Prophet Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, delivered his keynote address at the Parliament on 100-year celebration. It was basically icing on the cake. The real celebration was this, that he went to the Parliament and spoke to the British British politicians, including Nick Clegg, the Deputy Prime Minister, also Theresa May, who's the Home Secretary, she was there, and a number of other Secretaries of State were there, and also some MPs in audience. So let's have a look at some of those few excerpts from his speech for blessing's sake.
As you are aware, we are currently celebrating the centenary of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat in the United Kingdom. These past 100 years prove and serve witness to the fact that the members of the Ahmadiyya community have always fulfilled the requirement of being loyal to their country and have always steered absolutely clear of all forms of extremism, rebellion, and disorder. Indeed, Ahmadi Muslims believe that love for one's country is an essential part of faith because the founder of Islam, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has emphatically ordered and taught this. Thus, let me make it very clear that every Ahmadi Muslim who is a British citizen, whether born here in the UK or whether an immigrant from abroad, is completely loyal to this country and has sincere love for it. Let me make it clear that we Ahmadi Muslims believe that in this era, the concept of a violent jihad by the sword is completely wrong and is to be rejected. I shall say again that today it is our community, the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat, which is following and living according to the original and peaceful teachings of Islam. And I shall say again that the hate-filled evil acts perpetrated by extremist organizations or individuals have no link whatsoever to the true teachings of Islam.
It's been a great, great privilege for me to meet you here. I think it's the second time we've met in the last few years. I know you are a regular visitor and speaker to parliaments and assemblies around the world, whether it's the US Congress or the European Parliament, and I think it is a great honour for all of us from all political parties that we should be gathered with you here in the Palace of Westminster to commemorate a very important moment, the establishment of the Ahmadiyya community here in the United Kingdom exactly 100 years ago. Like everybody here, I have long been an admirer of you and your community for many, many reasons. Your respect for family, respect for the elderly, but care for the young is something which I think has always been very evident and striking to me. Your commitment, as Ed said, to charitable works both here at home and abroad. You and I were discussing in our meeting earlier the model villages which the Ahmadiyya community is establishing in Ghana, a country you know very well, having worked yourself there, as you explained to me many years ago, is just one further demonstration of your community's willingness to act as well as to speak the language of humanitarianism and reconciliation.
It is indeed a genuine pleasure to be here today to be part of this celebration of 100 years of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community here in Britain. I'm told that when that first individual, the first missionary, arrived in London from India in 1913, he did something which was very British. He started giving speeches at Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park. But I'm also told your community's website records that the speeches weren't perhaps as successful as he might have hoped, because a former imam is quoted as saying that people would not listen to him very much. I have to say, Your Holiness, there are politicians in this room who know how that feels. But I think few would have predicted that 100 years later there would have been such a flourishing community here in the United Kingdom. And as both Nick Clegg and Douglas Alexander have said, I think what is striking about the community here is not just the message of peaceful coexistence and of peace that you spread, but of the example that you show and the members of the community show in their lives, but also the tremendous work that is done to raise funds for charities, to be part of the local community. And that is a message that I think we can all take away and would be good for more, perhaps, to abide by your ethos, as Douglas have said, of love for all and hatred for none.
It was a great pleasure to welcome His Holiness just now, and I think we had a very interesting talk about the work that His Holiness does and the Ahmadiyya Muslim community generally in promoting peace and reconciliation. And I would like very much to confirm my support for the work that His Holiness and the Ahmadiyya Muslim community are doing, particularly in London.
Yes, that event at the House of Parliament was, of course, very well received in the newspapers and certainly going to even the government's own website, looking at this story here, that extremism has no place in open and tolerant Britain. That was actually published from the Home Office part of this website. And Theresa May has actually commended the work of the Jamaat, the community, and also has quoted Hazur's words that if a person's heart desires, then they are free to accept Islam. But if their heart does not, then they are free to reject it. Therefore, Islam is completely against compulsion and extremism. Rather, it advocates peace and harmony at all levels of society. Then again, there's a picture on local Guardian, Theresa May being blessed in the presence of Hazur. And then lastly, for the time being, a message from the Prime Minister, Right Honourable David Cameron MP. He says that I know that your community has suffered terrible persecution, but I also know that your worldwide leader, His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, who is based right here in London, is a man of peace. These are difficult times, but the manner in which you preserve is exemplary. I hope that your good works, your message of peace and your philosophy of love for all, hatred for none continue to flourish in Britain and throughout the world.
Very interesting. Let's go to Bilal and ask him about this. Assalamu alaikum, Mr. Atkinson.
Wa alaikum salam.
We've heard here Theresa May and the government saying that there is no place in Britain for extremism, and that really it is a message of love for all, hatred for none, which is required at this time for Britain to move forwards. This is, of course, the message which we give in our mosques. How do you feel the British public are responding to that message up north? And is there progress being made within local communities as a result of the conveying of the positive message of Islam in, for example, Hartlepool?
Well, first of all, extremism of any kind has no place in any religion, but especially in the teachings of Islam. The word Islam, one of the meanings is peace. Our motto, love for all, hatred for none, are 6 words. It's a very profound word, and people should look more closely at them. We can hate what people do. We should never hate the people. We should try to love them. As far as our message from the mosques are concerned, in not particularly Hartlepool, but most of the region, we hold peace conferences, Holy Quran exhibitions, interfaith meetings to try to give the message. In fact, in Dewsbury last year, we did a Holy Quran exhibition in the town hall. And the EDL, the English Defence League, were outside protesting. But I didn't know that one of them actually came up to view the exhibition, the Holy Quran exhibition. And afterwards, he came over to me and he says, I like what I see. Would you mind if I take my children to your mosque in Bradford to have a look around there? So, you know, when you present the truth to people, the true teachings of Islam, so, as I said at the beginning, it's so magnetic, it's so attractive, it's so appealing to the human conscience, to the human heart, that people are attracted to it. So this is what we have to do. We have to give this true message.
Well, why, Mr. Atkinson, then, why, let's take that example of that individual, that gentleman you mentioned, why was he there in the first place? What is prompting people to the streets to go outside of mosques and to shout and cry that Islam is a negative force in Britain? Why is he there, do you think?
I think he's there as a counterweight, because what the people in EDL perhaps are not educated, as most people aren't educated as regards its true teachings of Islam. Some people who call themselves Muslim and do these foul deeds, well, we can't call them, we're not allowed to call them non-Muslim, but they should look at their own practices and see if they are in line with the teachings of Islam. And this is why this EDL is being formed, because they want to counteract these fanatics who call themselves Muslim, and they are blind at the moment to the true teaching of Islam. Most people see Islam as one body. Unfortunately, Islam is dissected into different sects, and the Ahmadi Muslim are separate from those sects.
Mm. Well, this leads us on very well, actually, to something that happened only just last week, Mr. Dean. Here in the largest mosque in Western Europe, something very interesting happened in relation to the BBC. Can you tell us more?
Yes, on Jummah, we were approached by the World Service that they wished to come to Butterworth and to do a program about Islam, about Ramzan, and what it was like being a Muslim in Britain. And the program started, actually they arrived here around Tahajjud time in the morning at 2:30. And they set up here, and they started the interviews from 3 o'clock, and these interviews were with members of our Muslim community as well as outside, and they lasted till 8 o'clock in the morning, so 5 hours. And the Jamaat had a number of different people from different backgrounds. We had yourself interviewed. We had Mrs. Safiya Salam, whose parents were actually Jewish originally from America. They converted to Ahmadiyyat. She was a born Ahmadi, and she gave her impression of living in the United Kingdom, bringing up a family. And then they had some outside speakers. And then from within the community, they had members of the Jamia Ahmadiyya, the young imams that have come, who are British born, who have come through Jamia and were giving their impression of what they would be doing.
This is very interesting. This leads on perfectly to part number 3, which is the future of Islam within Britain. Looking at this, it seems to be a very positive response from the media to some extent. You have the azan being played on Channel 4. You have BBC coming to the mosque, wanting to speak to us about Islam within Britain and the role which we play. So, in your opinion, Mr. Rafiq, what does the future of Islam look like within Britain? Is it a positive picture? Is it a negative picture?
Well, it's a positive picture. I think that Islam is definitely going to be triumphant in Britain. These are the prophecies of the promised Messiah. The missionaries of Ahmadiyyat are working hard. You can see a change, for instance, in 1926, when this mosque was opened and the first call of prayer was given, we had a neighbor, there were 2 houses, 63 Melrose Road and 61 Melrose Road. 61 Melrose Road then did not belong to us. There was an Englishman living there. He took us to court and he said that they should not be allowed to give azan because that disturbed me. And eventually we won this case. But you can see, the change, the positive change, that was the time that we were even taken to court for calling azan. And today, Channel 4 is broadcasting azan every morning. So that great change has occurred. So if this sort of change can occur in a few more years, this is going on, certainly the people will come and people realize that the future of Britain lies actually in Islam. As I mentioned, that slowly they are coming, that the Islamic Sharia should be adopted here. The Archbishop of Canterbury said that we should especially adopt the rules of divorce and khula and all these into our judicial system because they are very simple, they are very easy to understand and to follow. So this will go on. This is my firm belief.
Triumph of Islam, you feel?
Yes, this is my firm belief that Islam is going to be triumphant here.
So
it's a really key.
Islam does not actually impose that, does it? I mean, of course, you can certainly, they want it to be bringing into their country, for example, a Sharia law, but Islam does not say you have to bring Sharia law in every Western country or any non-Islamic country. Is that by choice?
I didn't follow you.
So basically,
I think the question is really pertinent, isn't it?
Yes.
Because I think Farooq Sahib is we've seen this in the research, is that people say Islam within Britain, wonderful. Yes. But then others say Islam within Britain, does that mean the spreading of Sharia law? So Mr. Dean, I mean, what do you think is, or Mr. Rafiq?
These are in minority, the people who are talking against us and who think that Islam is a religion of, sort of which preaches terrorism on the wrong side of jihad and all these things. I think the majority of the people are listening to us. They are very responsive to us. And we have seen this, when we distributed these pamphlets in millions of houses. There may have been some hostility, but generally the people accepted it.
It's been a very positive response.
There was a positive response, sort of nobody
yes.
Did anything, they accepted it. And even in many cases, I was told that not only they were accepted, they will come out and they will thank and they will say, yes, it's a new thing that we are going to have. So I think there is a vast field for Islam to work in this country, and inshallah, very soon this whole thing will change.
It will change. But Mr. Dean, I mean, people are very concerned, some people, perhaps through miseducation, through misinformation, that if we're talking about the triumph of Islam within Britain, it's some sort of political shift. It's some sort of by force almost, that Islam will be brought into the country and it will fundamentally change British values. Britain as a whole will go backwards. What do you think? Very briefly, we don't have too much long left.
Not
but
at all.
Is it a positive change?
I mean, the history of Islam shows the golden period of Islam that wasn't the case. The local cultures, local traditions that were not in conflict with the teachings of Islam in terms of the oneness of God. They were always adopted, and that's why you have so much colourful Islamic world. If you go to the Far East, you go to Malaysia, you go to India, Pakistan, West Africa, they're all Muslims, and they all have different cultures and different traditions. but the Islam is the basis of Islam is the same.
So you can have cultural change.
Islam has an
The only problem is, Mr. Rafiq Saab, I think we're just about to run out of time. From what I'm getting from you both, though, is that Britain and Islam are not in any sense contradictory, but in fact they are very much from the same universal principles of justice. We see it on the leaflet: freedom, loyalty, equality, respect and justice. So Farooq, I think this is perhaps the key message we can take away from today, is that Islam in Britain, should we be worried? No, in fact, it is really a case of looking for the British people to ask deep questions about what does it mean to be British, and does in fact Islam take forward those values of being a British person. So it's been very beneficial for us. I hope it's also been beneficial, inshallah, for the viewers at home. Please catch this again. The repeats will be shown on MTA, but also please join us next month for episode number 10, when we'll be looking at another contemporary issue which faces Islam in the modern world. Until then, may Allah bless you. Jazakallah, thank you very much, and Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
He has launched the campaign to try and counter the extremists.
Now speaking out to denounce terror and extremism.
30,000 people formed a human chain in the south this afternoon in the name of peace.
We're asking if religious intolerance is on the rise.
We believe that religious freedom is a fundamental human right.
Giving a message that Islam is a religion of peace.
We must all endeavor to spread love and a sense of community